Kellie Emmerson and Atticus. How are you guys?
Very good, thank you. Right?
Look at now. I think I couldn't have picked two great experts that I'd prefer to have here. There are no two greater experts in the field than to talk about race strategy than Kellie Emmerson and Atticus Angel. Sorry, Angel. Both your last name's now Kellie Angel, technically, right?
Yeah, technically it is. I've changed it in some places and not others.
All right. Well, it's great to have you both here. Kellie, we can get into it a lot more detail a bit later on, but I do want to say firstly, congratulations to you and Tegan for the news that you're about to become parents again to another little one, another little friend for you, Atticus, in July. That's exciting.
Not happy about it. Thank you very much. Another boy coming in July.
So good. And
I think it's bedtime.
We can pause for Atticus.
Say bye everyone.
See you, mate. That is a sweet jumpsuit if I've ever seen one. I wonder how far you could run in that. So yeah, congratulations, Cal. And the other big news is that you've upgraded to the harder race now at Buffalo, which is the 5K.
Exactly.
I think it's so common in our sport to get a little bit carried away with always going further and that being the pinnacle. But many times I've said before, like I'd rather race 100K than race a 5K as hard as I can.
It's true. And doing it at, when is it, April? I'll probably be about 30 weeks pregnant, so that'll be an extra little challenge.
Yes. I'm not even going to pretend I might even consider knowing what that might even be like in that respect. But total respect to you for still coming out and and giving it a go. That's so rad. Cal, I'd love you to just give us a little bit of a background on your career as a runner, just so we know, and so people can start to understand why it's we're so kind of lucky to have you here tonight to talk about something that's quite important, which is like the race day strategy. So give us a short little insight to why you love the world of trail running.
Sure. So I guess the main thing is it's it's allowed me to travel the world pre-COVID, and go to so many different places and meet so many different people. I can't actually remember how long I've been doing this stuff for now. I always say 10 years, but I realize that I'm getting older and it's probably much longer than that now. But yeah, I guess I've raced a lot in Australia, and I've raced a lot internationally, on the UTWT sort of circuit, I guess, and at UTMB and some of those bigger events around the world. And I, bringing it back to Buffalo, I've raced the marathon twice and I did the 10K last year.
Nice. And within all of that, I was lucky enough to meet you and Tegan. Actually, like, we got to spend time together firstly really at the 2015 Trail World Championships. So you've definitely raced at the highest level with a couple of world championships, mountain running championships and stuff like that. Do you learn a lot from those experiences compared to something like the Buffalo Marathon, or can they be equal opportunities for you?
No, you definitely learn a lot. I'll never forget racing the OCC. It was my first international race, and that made me realize what the sport of trail running was all about, because at the time I was used to running a few little events in Australia and going over there and running some actual mountains in Europe. It was a completely new experience. It was a hiking race. It was not something that I'd trained appropriately for, probably. So it changed my perspective a lot. And then the more and more you race overseas and you race on different terrain and at different elevations, and it really changes your perspective when you come back to Australia. And makes it doesn't make it easier, but it makes it more achievable, I guess.
Mm. I think it's a really interesting point that you bring up, because when I think about Australian races and I compare them to a lot of European races, Buffalo Stampede stands out as one of the kind of main Australian races that you really have to incorporate a lot of that hiking and a lot of that, like, you've got terrain out on the Buffalo course that is quite different to a lot of other races in Australia. You know, it's not like two bays at all. It's not really like UTA in many ways. And you've got all these, it's quite unique in that it has some super steep uphills, super steep downhills, bit of technical, bit of running in there. And you've got to like understand how using that terrain with your strength can really help your day.
Yeah, I think to run Buffalo, you need to be a really good all-rounder. And it really does help to know the course and know what you're coming up against, so that you can train specifically for different parts of the race. Definitely.
Yeah. So Kel, the sacred day that is race day, right? Like, we do so much training and so much preparation, and I don't really know the exact stats on it, but I believe it's around about the training and all of that is about 99.9999% of the running that we do. And race day is that 0.0001% of the running, but it's this like sacred day that we find ourselves, I find myself, I would love to hear your thoughts, but I find myself with just a completely different ability and perspective on thrashing anything that has to do with my body going on. So how do you view race day, and how do you think of that, just that one day?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess it's, everything comes down to that one moment, and it's really challenging to get it all right on that day. You've practiced different elements in your training at different times, but on race day, everything needs to come together at once to work properly, and particularly in an ultra, that's really, really hard to do. So I think mentally you need to be prepared for something to go wrong, and to be able to get through that. But it's I guess it's managing all the little variables that you can, from your food intake leading up to race day, to making sure you've got all your gear ready and ready to go, that you've got a couple of alarms set you're not going to sleep through. There's multiple things just to get to that point, and then be able to perform on the day.
Kel, you work with a number of athletes. You do a lot of coaching as well. How does it work for you personally, and how does it work for the athletes that you coach? Like, when do you start thinking and talking about the race day strategy that happens on that day, so everything does go okay?
I think that probably the initial conversations on that start really early, because you need to, I'm big on specificity of training. So I think you need to know what race you're doing well in advance. That might be months and months in advance, so that you can prepare specifically for that particular race. And so, that in terms of the terrain that you're going to be training on and how you're going to approach that those conversations might start quite early. And then when it comes down to more specifics of actual race day strategy, that would probably only be a couple of weeks out, I think.
That's good news, because we've got like just under 8 weeks until Buffalo. And so now is still a good time to start 100%. To put those thoughts in place.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay. That's great. Okay. So we've got just under 8 weeks. We've got enough time to start to understand that, like you said, things really do need to come together on race day. There's a lot of variables, and there's a lot of things that we can control, a lot of things that we can't control as well. So like, if we say we're sitting down now, I give you a phone call. Hey, Cal, I've got Buffalo Stampede, 100K race coming up. I just want to I want to get your 5 tips for how do I go about planning race day strategy. Like, what have you got for us?
I guess first and foremost, it's about knowing what your strengths and weaknesses are. One, so that you can work on your weaknesses, but also so that when you go into the race, that you can make the most of what your strengths are and not get too worried for your weaknesses. I particularly remember running the marathon in a down year, maybe it was 2017, and I knew who my competitors were, and I knew that some of them were going to be much better on the technical downs, but I knew that I was going to be faster on the flats. So it was about knowing what was going to work for me and allowing those people to go on the downhill down Buffalo and having confidence in my abilities that I would be able to catch them later. And that's what happened. So, you know, I think that's really important to know what you can and can't do well. I think it's important to have confidence in your equipment. So from training with your pack and training with your full kit that you're going to need, to having confidence in your shoes, you know, knowing what you're going to wear and having worn them in training and be confident that they're going to take you the places that you need to in the race. Also for a race like Buffalo, it might even be having poles, it might be using gloves. I can't remember if the race still goes through Choa galleries, but I found having gloves a good idea to get to slip through there without having to worry about messing your hands up too much. And even in, on some of the climbs, you know, climbing up nicks and things like that, where you're scrambling a bit more. So that's another thing. I guess being prepared for any sort of weather. Buffalo has had really hot years and it's had really cold, horrendous rain years. So it's good to, you know, train in all weather conditions. Even though I must say I'm a bit of a dry weather runner. If you can, you know, don't put off runs just because it's raining, because come race day, it's good to be prepared for that and know that skin is waterproof and you will get through, no worries. Nutrition, understanding and having practiced your nutrition intake and knowing how you're going to approach that during a race. It's always very different to training. So we can practice what we want with our gels in our training, but when you're in a race, you're moving much faster, you're using a lot more energy. So I think it's important to, and I try and encourage lots of my athletes to try and do a couple of events in the lead up to their big A race, just so that they can practice that stuff properly. That's some of that. Oh, okay. One other one is knowing the terrain and actually training on the specific terrain for the race. And if you have done that, you'll feel much more comfortable come race day. You know, particularly with Buffalo, like you said, there's technical downs. You need to be comfortable with those. There's some really steep uphills and lots of people don't hike in training, but I think it's really, really important because you're using different muscles and you need to be able to power up really, really long ascents as well. And then there's lots of flat runnable parts in Buffalo as well. So a bit of everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think it's quite interesting when you look at kind of the stats on people that unfortunately do not finish races. Quite often the same reasoning comes up, and I like.
Sorry, try that again, Matt. You're just frozen on me.
Oh, are we good?
Yep. Go again.
All right. I liked it. It's interesting. The same common reasons come up about from people when they don't finish a race. Like it's very common that it's got something to do with a gut issue and GI distress, or it is something to do with the weather, like you touched on. It might be something about their equipment failing, and it might not be like their pole breaking, but it might be that, you know, the shoes that they're wearing rub so hard that they get a blister, right? And that can be, you could consider that to be a failure within your equipment. And like you said, if you look at all those situations in the lead up, you kind of, I like to look at it as like you're eliminating these excuses for why you're like not going to finish at the end of the day.
Yep, I think that's a great way.
Because we had a chat with Benny last week, and Ben touched a lot on a lot of the same things as yourself, which is super interesting, and it's good because, you know, I was like, oh, I don't know if Ben really knows what he's talking about, but obviously, like, this is this is a little bit of confirmation.
Look, Ben doesn't always finish his races, but he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, he definitely does. Yeah, no, he's a good sort in that regard. But like, so what do you do in a race? Like, and if you've got a real life example of this, like, it'd be awesome to hear it. I feel like that's a great way for people to learn. But like, what is an example of when you've been in a race and something's gone wrong and you've had to deal with that then and there? Like, what is your process of doing that?
Yeah. I guess the biggest example, the one that remains most clear in my head, was UTMB in 2019. So that was just before COVID hit, one of my last international races. And I guess, you know, to start with, the pressure of going back and doing that race after performing so well before was already pretty high. So I had big expectations for myself. But it became apparent quite early on that the race had other plans. So I started having some I guess UTI type symptoms pretty early, which was really strange for me in a race. It never happened, and I felt like I'd been drinking and things okay. But yeah, I was stopping to have to go to the toilet all the time, and then by the time that I got to the 80k mark, I was urinating blood, which is always a pretty bad sign.
That's no good.
Things do happen. And so that was a pretty big deal. And in a 100-mile race, when you know you're going to be out in the wilderness for such a long time, it was a really big decision. Do I keep going or do I stop? And at that time, I just had to make the call. Okay, I want to finish this thing. I've come all this way, but I'm not going to be able to perform the way that I want. So I'm just going to slow it right down. I'm going to drink a heap. I'm going to keep eating and just keep moving forward slowly. And that's what I did, and everything came good, and I managed to finish in a reasonable position. Obviously, it wasn't where I had hoped, but I finished the race, and you know, I was still satisfied with that outcome given the situation. So yeah, it's I guess the other thing is it's really hard to think clearly when you're not well and you've already been running for 70 or 80 Ks, you know, so sometimes it helps to have someone else help make those decisions for you as well. So get some advice from other people around you or your support crew.
Yeah. Within that, like, personal dialogue you had with yourself, like, was it that simple, or were you fighting, and did you have to, like, what did you use to really gain reason in that state of, like, you know, 80k deep into a race? Like, what did you call upon to help clear yourself in?
I don't know. I was just trying to be real and I guess think about the consequences. I guess having a medical background, you sort of understand that could be really, really severe to my health. So you got to put things into perspective. At the time, my support crew, my husband, was so keen on getting me moving and getting me, you know, staying in my position that he didn't really even catch on to how serious that was at the time. So it was probably me being more reasonable than what he was. Yeah, but I guess, you know, it helps to keep eating and make sure that you, you know, you have some sugar in your blood to be able to think straight as well. Is probably one key.
Yeah. With an event that's shorter, say like the Buffalo 20k, right? That I still, you know, like I said before, it's whether you're doing the 100k or the 20k, it's not about the distance. One doesn't become more important because one is longer or anything like that. You know, each distance has value for each runner, and that's a personal thing, right? So I feel like, say we look at the 20k, how different is your, I guess, approach and race strategy to a 20k race compared to a 100k race? And I don't mean like just go as hard as you can because you run shorter, but like, what are the other things that you think about with a 20k race that might be different to a 100k race in your kind of strategy when you're out there running?
I guess it's knowing when to fuel at the right time. So you might, for a shorter race, you might load up on something, but you know, just before the race. I might have a gel a couple of minutes before the start. And it's about knowing your pace and what you can maintain for that period of time. I haven't done the 20K at Buffalo, but I did the 10K last year, and you know, I knew roughly what the course was. It had changed a little bit, but I knew that it was going to be fast at the start. I knew it was going to be fast at the finish, and there was a big climb up Mystic, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to run that. So it was about maintaining a fast hike and being able to get to the top and then use whatever energy I had to get down again. I think it helps in a shorter race knowing that it's going to be over pretty soon. So you're only going to hurt for a short period of time. And you know, it will be worth it when you get to the end. And that's a little bit different in a longer race where you really have to back things right off, and it's you know, it's a much different pacing strategy. I think that'd be the two key things for me.
Yeah, awesome to touch on that. What can you run us through what your pacing strategy would be for the 20K, the marathon, or the 100K?
So can you refresh my memory where the 20 goes? Is that one direction, or does it come back again?
It is kind of more of a loop now, but I guess like if you were in a hilly 20K race or a hilly marathon or a hilly 100K race, like how would your pacing strategy differ? Like what would you be telling yourself when you're out there?
Yeah, so I guess I'd have an average pace that I wanted to aim for on the flats. And for me, knowing that the flats are probably a strength of mine amongst ultra runners, so making the most of that while I can. And then for the uphills, I walk a lot in hilly races, so I probably wouldn't be looking at my pace too much, because sometimes it can make you feel really crappy. I remember looking at my watch once in a European race, and the pace was just blank because I was moving so slow. Yeah, I think you just got to keep moving forward on the steeper hills, and as long as you're moving, that's what counts. And then the downhills, you just got to have fun with them, especially that downhill through Mystic now is awesome on all the mountain bike trails. So it's about getting into some flow and having some fun, and then being able to bring it home strong with the flat bit at the end. With the marathon, I guess that's a little bit different because you start at the top of Buffalo. So I think 42Ks is not short. The first it's 8Ks I think you do at the top there. Are pretty fast, but you don't want to blow yourself up too early. So I think you need to be pretty controlled in that first 8K. The next section, you've got 10K straight down Buffalo, which will really smash you up if you're not careful, if you haven't conditioned your quads. I think a common complaint in races like this is cramping. People often bring it down to needing salt or needing magnesium or something, but often it's just conditioning. They haven't trained for that. It's really hard to find 10K downhills locally around Melbourne. So I think just, remembering that, and bomb it all you want, but if you need to go to your ability and what your muscles can actually handle. And then you could go over Keating's Ridge, so a bit more of a climb, and then through Buckland Valley is pretty flat and fast. So being able to, if you can run by that point after you've done those two little sections, I think that's really positive. And then you got the two big climbs up Clear Spot and Mix. So again, just being able to maintain a really strong hike and then finish it off down Mystic. Yeah.
Solid. And don't forget that 3K flat at the end along the river.
Yeah, you finish it off strong. Whatever you got left, you don't need anything after that. There's usually beer waiting at the finish line, so you're good.
That's no joke. That's 3K. And then take that to the 100K. Like I think you touched on a little bit before. Like sometimes you're telling yourself to hold back a bit, but what's your like dialogue when you're trying to pace and do well at 100K?
Yeah, look, at a race like that, I would barely even look at my watch, because pace doesn't really mean a lot because it changes so much with the different terrain that you're on. So you'd want to have an average of, you know, how you're going maybe per hour or something, but specific paces at the time, you know, I think are less important. It's a really long event and there's so many climbs as well. So, you know, running a hilly 100 like that is very different to running Surf Coast 100. I think that's important for people to realize as well. You're going to be out there for a hell of a lot longer. And so, yeah, you do need to pace yourself to what your body can handle. You do need to continue to eat at regular intervals. Some people will find, you know, setting an alarm to remind themselves, or even the simple thing of having things accessible. You know, I can get really lazy in a race, particularly if it's really cold and wet, and you just don't feel like getting your gels out of your pocket because it's too much effort. So, you know, if you can put them in a front pocket that doesn't have a zip, or, you know, simple things like that make a really big difference to actually getting some fuel in. And also on that, I guess, having some different means of energy. So not just relying on gels, particularly in a longer race, you want to have, you know, you might want to have some liquid fuel as well, and you might want to have some real food going. So at Surf Coast 50, for example, last year I had a whole heap of boiled potatoes at every checkpoint, and they were awesome. Yeah.
And I guess that's all so valuable. Hey, it's amazing how lazy we get, and we're just like, nah, I'm fine without grabbing that jacket.
It seems so stupid. It's little things like that, or even the jacket thing. I remember running Madeira Island Ultra Trail, and I thought I knew the elevation profile, and it bucketed down rain. And I think we came into a checkpoint in the middle of the night, pouring with rain, and Tegan said to me, you know, do you want to change your clothes now? And I was like, no, we're going down now. Like, we're not going to be up high. You know, I'll change at the next one. I didn't want to waste any time. But that next section was extremely exposed to the wind, and I've never been so cold in my life. And that, combined with then not being too lazy to actually get my fuel out, I was just done by that next checkpoint. It was a really stupid decision because I was rushing, and two, I was being lazy about fuel. So I learned some big lessons that day.
Isn't it? I find it so interesting and mind-blowing that we're out there for 12 hours racing, and we make decisions based off like 20 seconds.
Yeah, it's
like,
true.
It's like, I'm not gonna tie my shoelace now because that will take 20 seconds. Like, and you're just like, come on, like, we're out here for 12 hours. If you stopped just to pause to look at a flower for 30 seconds and enjoy that, right? And that was so stoke fulfilling, and you were like, awesome, now I'm ready to run. Like, that 30 seconds in the scheme of things is nothing, you know?
It's true. Yeah. It's interesting though. If I compare myself and my husband, for example, we're very different on that front. I can ignore a lot of things, a lot of niggles, and I will, because I'm either lazy or I'm in a hurry. Exactly that mindset. Like, no, I'm going to waste time. Whereas he will stop for every single little annoying thing, even if it's his water slushing, or there might be a little stone in his shoe, or, you know, so I guess it's finding a balance, I think, because all of those 30-second intervals can add up. But, you know, you don't want it to end in tears. So it's finding a nice balance.
Absolutely. And I think like something like a stone in the shoe, it's like there are definitely a couple of things, hey, that if as soon as they pop up, try to attend to them like sooner rather than later, because things like stones in your shoe or small hot spots, or if your bag's rubbing in a certain spot and it doesn't feel that bad, but it's kind of feeling like it could turn into something, like if you do knock it on the head, it could save you a lot of pain and a lot of time later on.
Yeah, definitely.
What is your recommendation? Because this is, as we touched on before, GI, like stomach upset, GI distress is a really common reason for people to pull out of races. If you're in a race, or if one of your athletes was in a race and they were, say, 50K in, and they could feel that their stomach was really turning, and they kind of had a sense that it was only going to go one way, like what would your advice be to them about trying to reset or try to deal with that stomach issue?
I'd probably suggest that they back off the pace a little bit so that the blood can go to the right places in your body and digest properly. Also trying to change fuel. So, if there's other things available at the aid station, trying something else, obviously, if that wasn't working. Another good strategy is that I've found in the past is ginger tablets. So ginger beer is great if you have access, but you can carry ginger tablets on you really easily. And I find that they have helped me in the past. So I often just carry them in a race. And then just don't forget to drink as well, but obviously not overhydrating as well. So it's, again, if you can practice all these things in shorter races leading up to race day, it will always help. But it can be a bit of surprise when you're going much longer than you have before. You just don't know how your body's going to react. So having a few alternatives on you ready to go, I think, is important. But also, depending on the situation, I remember one of the first years I did Surf Coast, I had the exact problem and I couldn't eat anything for the last at least 30K. But Red Bull was my savior that day. and I did manage to finish and win on Red Bull. So whatever works.
Stuff gives you wings, apparently. Roll with it. So you chat a lot about and it's quite consistent where, you've got someone crewing you in races. What do you do with your crew before the race to make sure that you're both on the same page? Like, do you cook them a really lovely dinner and then you work through a checklist with them, or do you have a Zoom meeting like we're having right now? Like, what are the things that you make sure your crew is aware of when you're before the race?
Yeah. I guess I'm pretty lucky in that usually my husband is my crew and I don't need to prepare him too much these days because he has a pretty good understanding of what's going on. But early days, and if he wasn't available and I had my parents or someone, for example, who really didn't understand as much, it'd probably be writing everything down on a bit of a spreadsheet. So I would probably don't as much anymore, but in the old days, I would write a spreadsheet of rough times that I would be expected at different checkpoints, and exactly what I needed, and then all of the other options that I might want, which can get hard for crew when you're in a big bag along just in case. But it has paid off in the past. I remember, I think it was for UTMB actually, I had trouble with my shoes in the first 20K, and I had said to Tegan, just bring these shoes maybe just in case. And I hadn't put them in the bag. I just said, keep them in the car just in case I need them. But he's like, no, I'm going to bring them. The car's too far away if you actually do need them. And sure enough, that's what happened. I had to swap. So I was very lucky that he had that initiative. But yeah, I think it's good to have a little bag of things that you're definitely going to need. So if it's refreshing your gels, having it in a little Ziploc bag so you can just grab that. But also having a few things laid out that you might want. So if you want to put a hat on instead of your buff, or if you want to put some sunscreen on, or you've just got some options, because you can think about all of these things, 5K before the checkpoint, you go, yep, I'm going to get this and this and this. And then you walk in and your mind just goes completely blank and you forget everything that you had planned on getting. And then you realize after you've already left the checkpoint and shit, I needed that. And you've got another 5 hours ahead of you or whatever without that thing that you really needed. So I think having it visually there and being able to select what you need is important.
So true. Far out. And dropping off your rubbish. The amount of times I've run out of an aid station. Damn it. I'm going to
thinking about that the whole time.
It's most annoying. That's an awesome insight. It's so true. And what is your plan whenever do you intentionally try to support other runners out there in a race? Like if you were to pass someone, is that something that you try to consciously do or be aware of?
Oh, definitely. And my first ever trail race was 2 days, and I think that's what really got me into the sport, because running down Hislop's Road where everyone is cheering everyone on, I just found that part so nice and exciting. So that's definitely something that I try and take into it. If I'm not pushing too hard and can still talk, I'll definitely try and encourage others.
Yeah, for sure. I find it really interesting in the hardest moments of an ultra or a 20K race or a 10K race or a 5K race, right? Like, do you ever like go into that zone or that focus where like you've got a mantra or something, like something that you just need one singular thing that helps you get through? Like what is that for you?
Oh, my usual mantra is just hike the shit out of it. You come across a big hill and you're like, how on earth am I going to get up this? You just got to keep moving forward. Just hike the shit out of it.
Yeah. I think, yeah, like I've heard so many interesting ones in the past as well. Like some people count like to the, like a good friend like Em and Steve were telling me about just counting to 4 over and over again. And I was
That would
like,
probably drive me bonkers, I think.
yeah, but it's like, I think there must be something in that you're like, it narrows your mind and your thought and your focus onto one thing, and you kind of just trick through with it.
Yeah, just finding your flow. I think that's it.
Do you have any other kind of tips for that mental strength or mental toughness or mental tricks? Because there's the physical side, and then there's like your mind in these kind of things. What do you recommend for people to in that whole realm and that space?
Yeah, I get asked that question all the time. How do you train the psyche? Like, how do you train that mentality? And I really don't know the answer to that. I think I was born with a lot of determination, which I think helps. But I guess to help that, I think for lots of my athletes, it might be figuring out, what their longest distance is going to be before a race. For some of them, it might be purely based on the physicality of what's needed. But for some, it's, okay, I'm doing a marathon. I need to do a marathon before marathon day so that I know I can make the distance. So it's knowing what's going to get you through. I think it really helps to have trained on the course and know what you're coming up against. I think that's a massive advantage if you have the opportunity to do that. And I guess just remembering that you chose to be there, you chose to be out there, and you want to be there, and that sense of achievement of when you cross the finish line makes it all worth it, because there are many times when you'll question yourself when you're out there, why did I sign up for this thing? Why am I here? But you'll get to the finish line and then you'll end up signing up for another race and realize that what a massive achievement was, and all of the other benefits that it brings to your life.
Yeah, I think that's so important to touch on, like yeah, so good. What about that day before the race, that that 24 hours, 12 hours, and even like that 2 hour before, like there's can be a lot of emotion, a lot of double guessing, a lot of mind games that are totally unnecessary. But what's the process for you over that kind of 24 hours before a race?
Yeah, I guess it's probably trying to have some downtime, but often that's driving to the race, or often it is very busy packing or doing what you need to do. But I guess there's a few things. Is watching what food you're eating. So for me, I'll try and go low FODMAP a couple of days before the race. I found that helps me, my digestive system, once I'm in the race. One of the big things I think is getting caught up at the race festival. It can be, you head down to the race festival and it can be, it's all exciting and it gives you, it gives you a bit of extra adrenaline to get pumped for the race. But it's really easy to get stuck there talking to too many people, being on your feet for way too long, not drinking any water. So I think it's good to set a time limit for yourself or go down early and, be able to come back and put your feet up. And then getting everything ready, getting all your gear and your nutrition and everything ready for the race the night before, so that there's very little that you need to think about when you wake up in the morning, because it can, you can end up being in a bit of a rush or not having had very good sleep. So if you've got everything ready to go, you just need to get dressed and have breakfast, and off you go. And then it might be just planning, how your morning's going to look. For me, I try and get as much sleep as possible, so I will eat probably a bit later than I should, but I'd rather get my sleep. That's probably more so now that I have a baby. And I might be having some coffee, as early as I can within that, and then some pretty basic breakfast, like a bit of toast and some juice or something.
Yeah.
And then getting down there at the right time, like you don't want to get there too early at the race start, but just enough time to sort of warm up a little bit and get your shit together.
For a 100K race, what kind of a warm up would you do?
Probably not much, to be honest. I might do a little bit of mobility work, a little bit of a walk from wherever I am to the race start, but I wouldn't do a whole heap.
And then how would that differ for a marathon and 20K?
For the marathon, I'd probably do a little bit of jog and some drills, nothing too intense. And for a shorter event, I probably would, try and run a K or two, and do some drills as well, and make sure that my body is ready to go, from the get-go.
Yeah, I think that's really important, hey, because it's there is something about warming your body up and just moving it through its paces, like, and just say, hey, like, this is about to go down, like, time to wake up. Like, the coffee's great, but like there's this other element you've got to wake up to. That's sweet. And you did touch on before that you might have a gel or something, like really just a couple minutes before the race too. And sleep. I don't have any kids, and so I don't want to try to begin to understand what it's like to have kids and the sleep that you get. But I've got on buses to race starts, and I'm just like chonked out sleeping on the bus. Like everyone else is like, yeah, it's race day. I'm like, you just rest. Like, this is chill time. Like, yes, you're wasting energy right now, which you could be using for the race. Just like chill out.
It's true.
It's a lot of weird looks. A lot of it's like, oh, right, like it's not stoked on things.
I think a key on that is trying to make sure you get a good night's sleep the night before of the race, because often the nerves and everything going, and often you don't sleep well the night before. So as long as you go in knowing that and you've tried to get some good sleep that week, then I think that helps. And the other thing is with the 100K, for example, I don't know what time it starts, but there might be some people that are out there for a very long time. So just understanding sleep deprivation as well, and knowing how to deal with that, making sure you've got some caffeine with you for later on in the race, to help pep you up a bit. Yeah,
for sure. Kel, we've got a couple of questions online, and one of them is, what advice do you have for a newcomer to the 20K race?
Just go out and enjoy it, I think, is the main thing. But don't get sucked into just running 20K around the burbs. Like, get out into the mountains and practice hiking, I think, is probably one of my main bits of advice. Is there is going to be a lot of hiking in the race, so practice for that and get your legs nice and strong.
Yeah, that was from Hayden. Thanks Hayden. And then Lucinda Scott said, how realistic is the 9-hour cutoff for the marathon for a newcomer?
I think that's pretty realistic. Yeah, you'll be fine, Lisa.
Yeah. Well, she was asking for her daughter, and her daughter's currently training like on the weekends out at Wilson's Prom. But like, Wilson's Prom, it's got a good bit of hiking.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that's pretty good. And if you often what I did today, actually, I was out training, was I'm training to be a sweep at Oscars next week now that I'm not racing, and I thought, okay, as for this sweep gig, I need to be able to maintain 5 to 6 Ks an hour. So that's all I went out to do today, and I managed to stay ahead of that with about 7.5k an hour. But I think maybe if you look at it that way in terms of beating cutoffs, okay, how much do I need to maintain an hour to be able to finish this in time? And if you can head out and train to that, I think that will help with that mentality a little bit.
Yeah. No, sweet. Awesome advice for sure. Another question from Hayden was, how heavy would you push your training a month prior to the 20K? Like for example, like would you do extra hills?
Yeah, look, a month prior would probably be peak time for me. So I'd definitely be doing my longest runs and probably, yeah, heaviest training load, a lot more hills and things at that time.
Uh-huh.
And then I'd probably start backing it off from the following week, probably 3 weeks out, start to taper.
Okay. Yeah. Do you work off like a 3-week taper?
Yeah, roughly. I wouldn't say anything specific, but yeah, roughly 2 to 3 week taper, I'd say. But maintaining some specificity in there and some sharpening sessions in the final week.
And do you, yeah, like with a taper, do you look at it like numerically, like you go from say like 100% of your training to 75 to 50 to 25? Like how do you break down say like a 3-week taper? Like what are the metrics that you change within that?
I'm not very much numbers focused, but it's probably more about time on feet. So yeah, the main one would be reduced long run, and then probably just reduce Ks overall within that over the 3 weeks. And then, yeah, probably the main way I'd look at it.
Yeah. Would you like, how would you know how much to reduce that by?
Through experience. Yeah, look, yeah, through experience, I guess for people playing at home, yeah, I think 3 to 4 weeks out would be your biggest week, and then you're slowly backing that off to the week before the long run might only be about 90 minutes. So I don't know, to give you a specific figure, but yeah, probably using the percentages that you did, something like 175, 50.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, and that differs like you said, like the more you've done it, the more you know what you need to do and stuff
and I'd
like
say
that.
that differs a lot for my various athletes too. It's knowing how they operate and what works for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it also depends how fast you are, because it often for the slower people, you don't want them still doing 20Ks a week before, but for the faster people that might be totally okay. So it's sometimes you need to think of it as time on feet, particularly if you're training in the mountains for a race like this.
Yeah, it kind of comes back to what you touched on before, like say your race is on a Saturday, making sure that you really have a good night's sleep on the Thursday, and then you've kind of banked that sleep. Like I don't know about you, but for me, like I might have a complete rest day on the Thursday, but try and get like a short run in on the Friday. So I'm not going into the race off a rest day because I feel like a little bit.
And that's definitely how I program most of my athletes as well. So usually be a rest day 2 days out, and then the day before, maybe a short 20 to 30 minute jog and some strides just to make sure the body's in tune and ready to go.
Yeah. This is I feel like this is a really interesting one to a lot of people, but what do you think of including strides in your training, and what do you describe a stride as?
So I guess to people who haven't really done them before, I guess I describe a stride as a comfortable sprint. I will often include them in trainings, particularly before before a track session or before some speed work, just to, I guess, let the muscles know what's about to happen and make sure that they're springy and ready to go. So often in our training, we might, start with some maybe 80 meter strides and, start at about 70% effort, and each one get a little bit faster.
Yeah, sweet. I I just feel like they've got a bit of a hidden power to them that I feel like is particularly potent for some like ultra runners who may not just make that neuromuscular connection sometimes within their body. So I just love hearing how people look at strides. I got another question from Lindsay, and it is, how do you alter your downhill running as opposed to the flats? She's fallen over a few times and is a bit spooked by the downhill.
Lindsay, this is what happened to me today. So even when you feel really confident on the down, sometimes they just don't want to play. But look, I think downhill running is depending on the steepness, I think it's a completely different technique to running on the flat. And the only way to get better at it is to practice over and over. There's some hills in the Dandenongs here close to home that scare the crap out of me, but by just doing repeats of them, you get more confident about where your body needs to be in space so that you can stay on your feet. And doing sessions like my husband is very good at technical downhill, so sometimes he would put us at the top of a hill and give me a handicap, and I'd have to run and him chase me 2 minutes later or something and see if he could catch me. So that was always good training for me to try and get faster and more confident as well.
Yeah, it's such a mental game, hey? The downhills.
It is. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you practice on different hills, the more you understand the specific terrain and what you're standing on the ground. If it's a wet, muddy hill, it might be really slippery. Today, for me, it was just really dry and loose rock, and I just couldn't get any traction. So different terrain will affect the way that you run down that as well. Yeah.
Kel, I'll ask you one more question, and then if anyone else has any other questions, I'd ask you to drop them in the comments now before we wrap it up. But my final question of the night, I'm not going to guarantee that, by the way. But what like you talked about before the equipment side of things, but what shoe would you be looking at running in at Buffalo, knowing what the terrain is like? And why do you come to that decision to use that kind of shoe?
Yeah, so I guess the terrain is pretty gnarly in places. It is quite technical in places. And then there's parts that are just on fire road. But I would go for my Hoka Speed Goats most of the time. In saying that, there's a new shoe coming called the Tecton X. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that, but they feel pretty awesome. They're got some carbon plates in them, and I think I would probably choose them now that I have the option. But I guess both pairs are very cushiony and got really good grip. So for me, looking at a race like Buffalo, it is really steep, and so you want to make sure that you've got good traction and you've got good confidence in your shoes, and that you're not going to feel every little lump under your feet as well. So yeah, I choose something that's really comfortable and that I know is going to support me and that is going to, help me stay on my feet traction wise.
Yeah. And how about, would you use poles? Is poles something that you'd use? And what's your view on that?
Yeah. Both times that I've run the marathon, I have not used poles because I figured there was too much running and that would probably just get in the way. But if I was doing the ultra, the 75 or the 100 now that it is, I think I would definitely take poles. Yep. Just knowing that how much elevation there is and how steep the climbs are, I think that would really help. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, beauty, mate. Beauty. I think that's all. I don't think anyone else has any questions now, but if they do, they're more than welcome to drop them in the comment thread and I can have a look over those later and potentially annoy you and run them past you, Kel, if they need your expert eye. But yeah, look, all the best with everything with the family and all that is going on over the next couple months. And yeah, we look forward to catching you in just under 2 months up at Buffalo.
Yep, it's always a great event, so we look forward to being there.
Sweet as, Cal. Well, thanks again for all your time and being so open and sharing with your knowledge. Yeah, it's super, super helpful, and I'm sure a lot of people get a lot out of it. So thanks heaps, mate.
Thanks, Madge. Everyone.